Welcome to Beyond the Ballot AZ. I'm your host, Tom Collins, Executive Director of Arizona Citizens Clean Elections Commission.
And I'm Gina Roberts, Voter Education Director for Clean Elections.
So, over the past few episodes, we've explored some very different corners of civic life in Arizona. We started with Arizona's oldest continuously running library, the Copper Queen Library in Bisbee.
Our public libraries are not just books. There's so much more to the services that they provide. And I believe the Copper Queen Library won an award, a national award, because not only do they check out books, they checked out tools for their residents. Yeah, so it's pretty cool.
I think that is great. I mean, Bisbee and Cochise County over the years have had such a up and down, over 100 years, right? I mean, the population boomed and then the population shrank. To have an institution like their library that's come through all of those different periods of time is fascinating bit of living history,
I think everybody should go out there and get their library card. And, maybe when they're commuting to the library, they might still see some campaign signs along the way. And, I'm not going to name any names, Tom, but I am still seeing some signs that probably should have been taken down by now. I think probably most of the time, those campaign signs are probably the first indicator to a voter that an election is coming up. And we had a great opportunity to talk to Tim Reister, he's founder and CEO of Reister, about, how his agency has spent decades thinking about how campaigns communicate with people. And so it's really interesting to hear his perspective.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think that you're absolutely right that those street side 4x4 signs are probably one of the biggest indicators that there's an election coming up. And, I personally, I kind of like to look at them and see what, different fonts and colors people are using and stuff. But, we also do get a lot of calls from folks who just don't like them. They think they're obstructing. One of the interesting things about the signs is there's actually a special law in Arizona that expressly protects political signs during the election period, starting 2 months before the primary. Those signs are not to be touched. It's a misdemeanor to take down a sign without authorization. In cities that do want to take them down, if they're not, if they're obstructing or not properly in a right of way, those signs aren't just any signs. Those are the specialist signs in Arizona.
Yeah, I can't imagine if we didn't have those protective laws of what some of those signs might look like.
Right.
So, but speaking of cities and towns, another one of our episodes was we had a great opportunity to talk to our very new town here in the state of Arizona.
That's right. Santan Valley is the newest town and it's Arizona's 92nd municipality. And we had a chance to talk with the town clerk and the first town clerk. She's the second employee hired by the city after the town after the town manager. And it's like trying to do a startup while it's already running, right? I mean, the streets are there, the people are there, and now we're going to have a town.
Startup government. Yeah, there we go. Well, and they had a very important election. Our primary on July 21st was their very first election to establish the term limits and, how to select their mayor and their council. Because originally, when they were first incorporated, it was the board of Pinal County. They did the appointments.
Right. So under Arizona law provides for the ability of an unincorporated area to form a town under certain circumstances. And it basically because what you're doing is you're turning county land into its own city. And so the county has a role in both setting up the election to do it and then appointing the first city council. The default in state law is that a new town council selects its mayor from among the council members. So, basically there's an instruction manual in state law about how to start a new town. And then once you have that started, you can start customizing it to what you want it to be.
Well, and I think there were plenty of ways too for the residents to get involved with, this newly formed government. We heard a great story from the clerk about the town didn't have a town logo. And so it was really great to see people get civically involved and submit their ideas for a town logo. And, civic engagement can happen in multiple forms. So that's kind of why we're here. We take you beyond the ballot on this podcast to learn about all these different aspects. That's
absolutely right. I mean, it is. I mean, we're talking about, voting to create a whole new government entity. We're talking about, basically your right to free speech as part of democracy when we're talking about those political signs.
Speaking of new and government, our November ballot. There's going to be something new there related to government. And we had some recent announcements about lieutenant governor.
So Arizona was one of a handful of states that didn't have a lieutenant governor for years. And what that meant is that the Secretary of State was next in line to the governor should the governor leave office, which happened in Arizona every 10 years, certainly for the last 50 years. It happened in the 70s, it happened in the 80s, it happened in the 90s. And it happened last in 2009 when Governor Napolitano became Secretary of Homeland Security, and Governor Brewer, who had been Secretary, became governor. And that was a party change, right? So that went from a Democratic governor to a Republican governor. And meanwhile, the Secretary of State's office remained Republican, right? So it essentially, the way it was set up, because the Secretary of State and the governor are elected separately, the possibility of a real party change in a discontinuity, right? It's supposed to be a continuity of government provision of the Constitution, but it created this partisan discontinuity where all of a sudden voters voted for one party and they got the other party because the governor left office. So this resolves that by creating one ticket for governor, where the governor candidates, nominees, and then the lieutenant governor nominees are voted for together, and the lieutenant governor, should a governor not complete their term, becomes governor.
So, I think everything that you said, Tom, was spot on. But the interesting point here is I think, what did our gubernatorial nominees actually do when they selected their running mate? Two of them did not select running mates that were actually of the same political affiliation. They chose independents, which is really, kind of fascinating, because it's not what you would have expected, right?
Yeah.
But we have our 5 recognized political parties here in the state, and anybody who's not affiliated with one of those recognized parties, they are considered, an other and independent party not designated. And we actually have 2 of those who were selected.
Right. So Governor Hobbs nominated former Mesa Mayor John Giles, and
Terry Ann Hurahan
selected a lieutenant governor candidate who's also an independent.
Well, I think to your point of the continuity of government, I think that's still there, right? Yeah. It's still going to be there, because I think that the nominees are going to be choosing a running mate who is aligned with their goals, their ideologies. But I think, from a voter perspective, you're not going to see on your ballot a political party designation next to the lieutenant governor's name.
Nothing in the Constitution says the person has to be of the same party, so that's not a requirement. And then the reality is that we have a lot of independent voters. We all know this, and so I think it does at least provide some recognition of that as well as a practical matter going forward. It reduces the role of the Secretary of State. Because Arizona is a state where governors have left office early for various reasons so much, the Secretary of State's office has really been seen as effectively the lieutenant governor, even if that only happens in certain events. And so now the Secretary of State is still the chief elections officer, but the Secretary of State's office no longer carries the cachet of being, if something happens to the governor, God forbid, I'm the person who gets to be in charge, because they simply won't be. And I think that, my own personal opinion is, given the way that elections have become a thermostatic political issue, I think that's better. I don't think that's what the folks who put this together were thinking about, but I think it works out better that the Secretary of State will be running for Secretary of State more than they are running for Secretary of State and maybe I'm next in line to be governor, because it diminishes the duties of the Secretary of State, which are critical to have your eye on the 9th floor from the 7th floor.
That's obviously a great point in the event that we're talking about a vacancy in the governor's office, but even day-to-day administration too. So when the governor is, out of state, out of country, and unable to perform their duties, right, they have to appoint an acting governor. You have the lieutenant governor who would be that role.
Right, that's right. And just for value to the taxpayers who voted for this back in 2022, the companion legislation says that and I think maybe the Constitution too, but says that this person has to have a job. They have to do something for the government while they're there. Our lieutenant governor will have an actual job that they have to do.
So that leads us up to our upcoming November 3rd general election. And so we have voters. You can look forward to receiving your voter education guide in September. We will be having debates for all of our statewide offices, including this new lieutenant governor one. We will be inviting those candidates. So you have plenty of opportunities to learn about who they are.
So yeah, make sure to check out the azcleanelections.gov website at any time to find out anything you need to know. We've also got our email there, and our email is manned. Our email is staffed 24 hours a day. We've been known to return emails on Sunday afternoons. And we're also we also try our best to get back to return our phone messages as quickly as possible.
Leave us your message, send us an email. We're going to get back to you. We want to support you this election season. Thanks for listening to Beyond the Ballot AZ. I'm Gina Roberts.
And I'm Tom Collins. We'll see you next week.